Good morning. Welcome everyone to this special budget meeting of the Barrie Police Service Board for September 22nd, 2025. I'd like to call the meeting to order and begin with our land acknowledgement. In keeping with Indigenous protocol and building respectful relationships between Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples in Canada, it is customary to acknowledge the traditional territories and ancestral lands of Indigenous peoples. We would like to acknowledge this sacred land on which the Barrie Simcoe Emergency Service Campus operates. It has been the site for human activity for 15,000 years. This land is the ancestral land of the Wendat and the Anishinaabe Nation. The treaty that was signed for this particular parcel of land is collectively referred to as the Williams Treaty. We are dedicated in honoring history and culture, Indigenous history and culture. We also recognize the enduring presence of Indigenous peoples on this land and are committed to moving forward in the spirit of reconciliation and respect. Thank you. Joining us virtually is Deputy Mayor Thompson and Mayor Nuttall, and Member Khan has also joined us. So we have a full complement. Our agenda was distributed in advance. A motion to approve today's agenda, which has one item, the 2025 operational budget. Mr. On, a seconder. Mayor Nuttall, any amendments, comments, or adjustments to today's agenda? Seeing none, those in favor? Since we discussed it on Thursday, I assume there are no conflicts of interest with respect to today's agenda. So as mentioned, thank you everyone. The purpose of today is a special meeting to review the proposed 2025 operation and capital budget that has been submitted by the chief and senior command. The board has now had an opportunity to review the submission that was presented to us on Thursday. I think I'll begin by simply opening it up for questions for the chief and for Ty and his team with respect to what we saw on Thursday. So I'll start there with some immediate questions that anyone may have. And is that Mayor Nuttall has his hand up? Please, sir.
Yeah, I was just reading the memo for this morning. The number of commissioned officers the goal is 280 by 2030. Is that, I'm reading that correctly?
Your worship, in terms of the growth strategy, that is the goal, yes.
Okay, great. The other question I had is, where do special constables fit into that? They don't, right? They go above and beyond that.
Yes, that is correct. They are not included in that number.
Okay. And so if and correct me if I'm wrong, but when we had the 2023 budget presentation, I think we were sitting at 224 commissioned active officers. That wasn't the goal, but I think that was the number. We had 26 on leave or not filled.
Your worship, yeah, so that would be the deployable number that year, yes.
Yes, yeah. And then what was the deployable number last year? I think it went to 234 or 236 or something like that.
Your worship, I can confirm, but I believe it was 238.
238. Okay, so we went from 224 to 238, and right now we're finally at a full complement at 250.
That is correct.
Okay. So we've gone up, call it 26 deployable in the last 2.5 years, just something like that, maybe 3 years. And the goal is to go up another 30 deployable over the next 5 years. Okay, I now I've got my head straight, so I appreciate that, and that's where my questions will stop there.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, but my interpretation is if 6 are added in 2026, that will give us the 256 deployable. Correct, Chief?
That is correct, barring anyone going off.
Yeah. If all things being equal, we'll be at 256 employed officers in 2026. If this is approved.
That is correct.
And just Lynn, please, start, please.
Just a quick question. We're talking about deployable. We would be we're at 250 now, would be at 256. How many officers do we actually have?
So we have a number of officers. We currently have 14 off on various types of WSIB and other maternity and such. So they're not included in that number. We also have other members that are on secondment, like permanent type secondment. So they're technically, but they're we have a larger complement that way, but we're not incurring their costs as their costs are part of their recovered as part of their secondment. For example, we have members down at the Ontario Police College. So that's part of the number, but not sort of deployable because they're there.
But there's no net cost to those officers that are on secondment. In fact, there
No,
may be a little bit of revenue from it.
It's pretty much cost neutral, and so it's not costing the city anything, but it just so they exist, but they're not. And I don't mean to make light of that they exist, but they're not deployable as in they're elsewhere. And we're not incurring any cost related to that.
Sean? Okay. Mr. Khan has a few questions that can you hear us, Mr. Khan?
I can, Chair. Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. Thank you very much. I did put one of the questions in the comments. I don't know if it's based on noise where I am, if that's better or not, but I'll attempt my question here. I appreciate that this is a budget meeting, but I also appreciate that budget also aligns with our ability to serve and perform. And really my question based on the goal towards achieving those net new 30 or 6 in the upcoming budget is just for context, what percentage of the time are we meeting our service level expectation in terms of response time within acceptable time frame based on the metrics of call averages and call type? In other words, is that 5 or 6 going to keep us in line, or are we still in a deficit position, for example, in terms of those performance metrics?
Chief?
So board member Khan, that question is while straightforward, is incredibly complex to answer. With respect to the actual ability to answer types of calls, it depends on the priority level and our ability to respond to them in the, there is no set key metric, key performance indicator in terms of across the province. There has never been one, but with respect to, now there is one for call answering for priority 0 and for most 911 calls, but for actual response times, there is no metric. And that can vary as widely from, a few minutes for a priority 0. That may not be soon enough, but it's humanly possible, but up to can be days for a priority 4 where it's an agreed upon, they'll let the call sit and be able to respond. So it's, but our ability to respond, it would be unfair for me not to point to the fact that with any growth in any population base, we do receive more volume. And volume is one of the nature, that's the nature of a population base. The more people you have, generally speaking, the more call volume, and we do see that. So our ability to address broadly our call volume, the best I can say is it's adequate, and and we are an effective police service, but there is no specific metric that we are either surpassing or failing at this point. I do understand that the Inspectorate of Policing is looking at call response times, but that is a different type of question altogether. I apologize if that's not clear. It's just, it is a challenging question.
I'd like to follow up on that then, Chief. Thank you for that. And I do appreciate the fact that there is no broad standard. Let me rephrase and narrow down the question. Is the service in a deficit position in any way? I know we'll never satisfy all people all the time, and I appreciate that. However, harm-based calls, are we meeting the requirement in terms of response time for all harm-based calls?
Member Khan, that again, harm comes in a number of varieties, and I'm not trying to be too or just in any way trying to avoid the question. We are addressing the highest harm calls as effectively as possible. I don't believe we're falling short of that by any stretch of the imagination. I think our response times to priority zeros and ones when it is a high harm call is impressive. I'm not going to suggest that we're not meeting that standard if there was a set standard or a satisfactory answer to the community. I mean, at some point, we're not going to make someone happy, or we regularly don't because we're not there as it happened. But at the end of the day, we are, I believe, a very effective service in meeting and addressing those immediate public safety concerns. It's just harm can be a shoplift or harm can be a violent offense, and they're very different. But our ability to respond to them is, at this point, I would argue we are an effective response. And I would point out, when we talk about where this service, up to the board, but service, when we talk about recommending growth, we are looking to reprioritize some of the efforts of our frontline members. So of that 6 constables that we are seeking, 4 of those we're targeted to go to frontline to backfill. And because an operational decision was made to take 4 officers off the front line and put them into the crimes against person office. And what they do is, because we're seeing so many intimate partner violence calls and domestic type calls, the idea being for the more complex type of those calls, where traditionally a frontline officer can get, it's a lot more work, but the reality is, in terms of service to the victim in the matter, the skill set of a crimes against person detective is far greater, specifically around trauma-informed approaches and the practice of interviewing, and it's a victim-focused approach. So, yeah, it's a win-win there, where the detectives take on more of the frontline response to more complex calls, freeing up time for our limited resources on the front line to address more of those immediate response, make it safe, and then have the detectives follow up afterward. We're trying to alleviate the more complex stuff for the front line, so they're able to more effectively respond to the immediate stuff for public safety. The other 2 members were targeted to be moved to backfill. So we take 2 more senior members off our front line and direct them to our what we call our high harm team. One of the few in the province that I understand, but these are a high harm team. They target what we know about our crime in our city. The most serious stuff is committed by a very small percentage. The purpose of those extra 2 officers were to backfill. So we have a team that goes out and actively checks on their highest harm offenders that do reside within our community, whether they committed the harm here or elsewhere once we become aware of that information through the bail dashboard or something like that. So again, it's very targeted deployment with those individuals. Sorry, long answer for a short question.
No, Chair, through you, thank you, Chief, and I appreciate that you separated out property versus physical harm. The physical harm was more my focus, not to diminish anything regarding the frustration people face regarding property crimes, but that was my answer. And thank you, answered my second question regarding the deployment of these 6 in terms of the gap that they will fill. Appreciate it. Thank you, Chair.
I have a few questions, if I may, Chief. Some of them may be directed to Mr. Bound. I know it's not an optimal metric, but it's one that's used a lot, is the cop to bop ratio. The provincial average is 171 per 100,000, and the national average is 178 per 100,000. And our service is currently 145. This is based on 2023 data. 2024 is not yet available. My first question, is that 145 total officers or compared to the 171 or 178? Is that deployable or total sworn?
Chair, my understanding is total sworn.
Total sworn, okay. And why is it not an optimal metric for measuring how many officers we might want to have based on our population? Because it does seem to be, in the range of 25 officers low compared to the provincial and national average.
Chair, so, and I've made it quite repeatedly known that I'm not a huge fan of this. It is a metric. It's not a terrible, like absolutely horrendous metric, but it is one metric we measure in terms of what a number could be for a given population. The challenge with it, with cop to pop, is that there's an assumption underlying that entire premise, is that there is a set number that can be effectively known across all communities, across all provinces, that across our country, that there's a number that if you have that number, that's the appropriate number to address the challenges your community faces. I would argue that we're in an effective and highly functioning police service, but the assumption would be, because we are so low in terms of the number of officers to our population compared to, let's say, Thunder Bay, who has 222 per 100,000, which is far more than we have in their 2023 Stats Can numbers, suggesting that's a far safer community because they have more officers. I'm not making that argument if you were to simply draw that inference from that. Now, I'm going to suggest that it takes more than that, and it's far more complex in terms of how you leverage those resources. I think at some point you have too few. I mean, you'll never hear the chief of police say you have too many officers, but at some point you have too few officers to address the challenges that your community may face. But I think what we're looking at is growth in our city over time with just sheer volume, and then us targeting in the places where we think where those resources would be most effective in an operational sense. You have me sitting here because you look. The board's asked is, what from an operational level, what do we think the service would be more effective at in terms of our ability to deliver service? And from the executive team and from the office, I'm going to suggest that, we think this is would I like 23 more officers? Yes. Chair? Do I think it's reasonable? No. And I understand that.
Thanks, Chief. My second question, the budget proposal is at 11.12 is what your office and the senior command think is what you need to operate next year. And then you gave us an option whereby that could be reduced by 1.25% the three year. My question is, if we go to 4 ops instead of 6 net new, my math, I'm not very good at math, is that will not have a substantial impact on this budget because we either hire them in July or we hire them in the fall. It would impact next year's budget. Is that we were saying, let's not have 6, let's have 3 or 4. That's not going to move the needle very much in this budget, especially if we move to the option of reducing it by the 1.25%.
Well, Chair, yes, but I mean, I think that deserves a more robust answer. My math skills, while phenomenal as they may be, I do have a subject matter expert in my lab here, so I'm going to hand that over to Pat.
So I'll just start by saying kind of what we've built into our 2026 budget. So the officers that we have in the budget now are meant to reflect officers being available for July, kind of midway through the year. With the officers specifically, they would start ahead of that just with their training. So it's kind of a combination of, the officer having 19 weeks as a cadet and then 24 weeks as a PC4. But to your point, that is correct. We're only recognizing essentially half of their salary right now in 2026. The full year annualization would occur in 2027. So you do lose some of the benefit of, adjusting those officers for the full year impact, to your point.
Those are all the questions I had. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, a presentation. Oh, I didn't realize.
Chair, if I might, yeah, and we have it's not going to be new information, it's just more perhaps information for the board to consider and some, again, the options are there for the board if they so choose. Just to further probably highlight some information that may answer some questions before we go any further. Is that okay?
I would, yes, welcome your presentation. I didn't realize that we would have opened with that. So please, and then we'll turn it back to the board for questions after the presentation, assuming that they may answer some of the questions that we are still outstanding. So let's see the presentation and then open it back up.
Mr. Chair, just a quick point of order, and I'm only doing simple math. Okay, so you asked a question about deployable versus total number of officers. So the total number of officers we have is actually 264, not 250. Is that correct? We have 14 off plus 250 deployable.
Yes, I think that's what.
Okay, so if we take that against 166,000, which is our number, we're still well short, and I'm not saying we are up where we're supposed to be, but we're not at 141, we're at 159. I just think we need to make sure we're, like, whatever the metric is we're using, like, let's make sure it's completely
Mathematically correct. Yeah, I think the numbers we're referring to are 2023, Mr. Mayor. So yes, if we deploy or add 6 in today's math, we would be slightly over 150. Is that correct?
No,
No.
because you've got 264 between those who are off.
Simple math. Yeah.
So 264 divided by 166 gives me 159.
159.
And then if you add 6 officers on that, you're actually going to 270. And I Deputy Mayor has all the information on our population growth, but if it was on today's number, you'd be 270 divided by 166, which would give you.
Please.
163.
Just to further clarify, like when you're looking at the bar chart and you look at what the other municipal forces are doing, are they talking about total complement or deployable? We have to compare apples to apples, I guess.
And again, that's so in theory, it's their total complement, but again, they face the same challenges and they may have backfilled from, and again, that is not the end all be all the metric, and it is a broad, very broad measure. If its accuracy, I can't even speak to. That's why I'm very uncomfortable just sitting on that one, because I repeatedly revisit it and say, I don't know. There is no specific number, and it doesn't make it a correct number anyway. Even if you had apples to apples, it doesn't mean that we have the exact same number as every other per 100,000 as every other community. It's not good or bad. It's a number. And is it effective? I could probably use another 30 if I lived in another location that faced a lot more challenges. I think we're doing, given our location, it's an impossible balance to speak to on just that metric alone.
Mr. Chair.
Please.
Yeah, I do want to be mindful of just making sure, as Member Strong mentioned about, comparing apples to apples. For example, I'd love to know what unique elements we need to consider. For example, the fact that we have a Marine unit, and what does that require of our resources, or the fact that we're along a 400 in human trafficking, or the drug elements. Not that every community doesn't have that, but a baseline, assuming all services and all areas that they serve are equal, would work. But I want to know what are the things that sort of stand out that pose either a unique challenge or a unique benefit about being in our community that would impact our requirement for resources.
Chief.
So there are 43 police services in Ontario. There are, not including the 9 self-administered Indigenous police services, there is as wide a swath of ability to provide services with respect to specialty units, including but not limited to explosive disposal unit, K9 unit, Marine unit, dive team, any number of tactical, hostage rescue, the myriad of units that can be provided comes down to economies of scale. The challenge we face is that across the province, some simply rely on the OPP if it is needed, and they simply, if it is needed, they contact the OPP and they provide those services with them. So they're not even, so there's no need for them to provide those services within their community. But as you get bigger, the expectation and the ability to provide those services more regularly is placed upon mid-sized police services. So, and whether it's fair or not is immaterial. We regularly use our tactical team, whereas smaller services sometimes don't use it at all year over year. And the challenge we face is how is that apples to apples? It's not. So what are the specific challenges in our community? As you can imagine, we were on an arterial road, a major highway with I'm not saying it's a massive, the size of the problem is a challenge to specifically speak to, but with respect to our hotels chains around those major arterial roads, human trafficking, we do have influx of problems from large centers with respect to drugs. We are facing a challenge a lot like other larger communities, but not small communities with respect to homelessness, addiction issues, mental health. We could speak about this at length for hours, sir. The challenge is we have a lot of challenges. So, and again, yeah, the list goes on, and our ability to provide services is good and bad because of our size. And I apologize that is not probably going to answer your question, which is a fair question, but that's where it comes down to pop to cop, and one measure alone does not answer the complex questions you're asking.
If I can just continue to follow up on that question, go back to Mayor Nuttall's comment. Today, if this budget's approved, we'll have 256 deployable officers and 270 that we're paying for. Is that correct? 256 plus 14. Ignoring this comment because it's a net
That
wash.
is correct, Chair, yes.
So what does the math say if we use 170,000 people? That's 100 and what's that math? I haven't got it. 160. I know we don't have the comparative because we don't have the data for 2026, but if we add 6, we're at 270 with 256 on the road, if you want to call it on the road, deployable, and a population of approximately 1.7. What's that math? 159. So if we would have our pop would be 159 in 2026. Thank you. Any other questions before we review the presentation? Deputy Mayor? Okay. Chief, over to you.
Until after the presentation.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Chair. Again, just to provide some further insight to the board, we want to review just a couple of things and some decisions on behalf of the board for within your purview, just to perhaps set that number or to certainly influence it. I'm going to hand it right over to Ty so we can, it's not a lot of slides, but we do want to make sure that you have this information.
Yeah, just to continue the kind of conversation, some of the questions that came up on Thursday, we put together just a little bit more detail, some of those questions. So we wanted to start just with the original budget amendments that were included in the 2026 request. And the first one is pretty straightforward. Both those reports were approved by the board on Thursday. The next two, I just wanted to highlight really in reference to the chair's question just on reserves and available reserves. So the two recommendations that we've included here One with a reduction of a transfer to the WSIP reserve, one of a transfer from the capital reserve. These two reserves really are the only places where we have kind of available funds to allocate the 2026 budget. Our operating reserve, unfortunately, is pretty low. We're at about 168,000. And then with the projected deficit for 2025, there wouldn't be any available funds to allocate to 2026. So we just wanted to highlight that first. The next few slides are just kind of showcasing the kind of new buckets based on some of the conversation we had on Thursday. So for our foundational policing or core policing, we've moved the inflation, U.S. exchange, and tariff into this area. Really just on the mayor's comments that, this is something that every business and organization needs to manage and deal with. So we kind of brought that into kind of our in-house bucket. And then we also would just highlight again kind of our revenue and efficiencies that we've been able to kind of leverage through our review and analysis, been able to kind of exceed that pressure from inflation within our core policing numbers. So this would be the separated category. Originally, we had kind of referred to it as external pressures. We've relabeled it provincial downloading. I don't know if that's the right term or the best term, but it really is to kind of highlight those pressures that are, kind of outside of the Barrie organization. So that would total 2.65%. This bucket largely remains the same, other than the fact that we have shown what it would look like with those kind of three budget amendments that were included in the budget request. So the numbers are reflective of that. And once we get into kind of the further potential members, then these figures would change again in this category. So this is what the total would look like, kind of separating kind of everything inclusive of, what's in our control, and then kind of separating the provincial downloading as the mayor has suggested. So taking out that 2.65% would leave the impact Barrie police request at 8.4%. So this represents the three other potential amendments that we have presented to the board. Obviously, there is some additional risk with these. The technology contract we spoke a bit more about on Thursday. That's supported. That would help reduce our technology budget and our kind of that would land in the growing and changing community under the technology and Axon stuff. The second one is kind of assuming the best case scenario for the NG 911 phase 4 grant. We do believe that will be successful, but obviously there's a risk if you assume the best and that doesn't end up happening. So we believe it will, but there would be taking the chances. That again would help reduce our IT technology budget further than the 200,000. And then the final one is kind of our, I guess, second best option to defer the recommended staffing, but defer that kind of 3 months into the fall of 2026. Actually, if we jump to the next slide, I'll just revisit this quickly. I know I didn't explain it very well the first time, but our recommended staffing plan and growth strategy is represented in that middle line, 6 sworn, 4 civilian support staff, and everything that kind of comes with those new staff. And having those available for summer 2026 would be the 1.9 that we've kind of embedded, built into our 2026 budget. And we increase or decrease the level of staffing. So the top option is reducing it to 4 sworn. Bottom option is increasing to 8 sworn and 6 civilian. That would either reduce or increase that 1.9% figure, and then going earlier or later would also impact the costing. And probably just reiterating the chair's point that the more we defer staffing to later in the year, then the more we would have to kind of pick up. And from there, I'm just going to pass it to the chief. He's going to kind of get into a bit more detail on the growth and staffing.
Thanks, Ty. I won't spend too much time here because I think we've already talked about top to top after this as well, top to top and our growth strategy. So this just is broad at that high level with respect to the growth of the city as well as the organization in terms of where we've been and what growth we've seen in the city. And again, I would take you back to it's just not a blanket statement with respect to volume, but we do see an increase in the volume and it continues to increase. And that's just the nature of a population base, the use of services as well, and that comes down to the number of households in the community. And again, it's not that we're growing and thriving community, but because it's growing and thriving, it is it continues to, and we're expecting to see that population continue to grow. And at some point, we do. There is a point at which you're going to need more services to address that, and we're just trying to keep up with those expectations of the community. We are trying a whole host of alternate measures and different approaches to offset those pressures. But we do at some point need that emergency response always present. Again, the idea being that with the growth of a city as fast as ours, we're just trying to keep pace to some degree. And I'm gonna go ahead there, Sarah. I'm not going to spend time on the top to top. We do have a growth strategy. I did speak to where we want to put those people. Jump right to slide. I want to come back to Ty and hold numbers. I think that's going to be what they want to do. Oh, sorry, keep going down to the very bottom. That last one. Sorry, the last slide. I'm just going to hand it back to Ty. No more. It's just so given the total numbers where we find ourselves and what we'd be looking at.
So this summary just represents if we were to adopt those 3 additional budget recommendations, which would result in the 1.25% reduction on the total budget request. And then again, kind of separating it very piece of separately. So those 2 together would be 9.87%.
So the 1.25, obviously goes against quote our controllable number that doesn't impact the provincial download percentage.
Yes, that's correct. The 1.25 is obviously decisions that we can make, but it wouldn't impact the provincial part of that budget request.
I've got a question, if I may, before we've reduced our transfer to the WSIB reserve from 700 to 500. Is it still underfunded at 500, or are we going to be able to? We were running quote a deficit in our WSIB for years, and I think this board probably 3 or 4 years ago, Lynn, said no, we need to fund this at least to get it close. Are we close at with a 500? Or are we close at 200? We only have to transfer 200 this year. That's the question.
So to answer your question, I would say yes, we're close. So the reduction to 550,000 is approximately what we're expecting to have for an expense from WSIB for the benefit administration part of it. That number can fluctuate. Obviously, depending on the situation, the reduction is really a result of, the success we've had in getting some of those members back to work. Last year, those expenses were close to 700,000. So this would be kind of aligning the transfer with what we're kind of seeing on the expense side. We also have built up a bit of a balance in the reserve. So the board did approve some of our surplus to transfer to the WSIB reserve. So we have a buffer of about 400,000 if things were to, decline, in 2026, then we still have funds available that would support that. And then obviously when we come back in 2027, if we need to readjust that up or down, then we'd bring back that recommendation.
There are questions from the board members, please.
Thank you, Chair.
Yes, sir.
Deputy Mayor Thompson, go ahead, sir.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. So the increase in officers, the recommended officers, Ty, is based on our growth numbers and our projected growth for the city.
Through you, Chair. It was in direct response to the request for a growth strategy from our organization, but it would be speaking directly to the growth of the city in part in terms of an appropriate response to the growth size.
Okay, perfect. So a follow up to that.
Deputy Mayor, sorry, if I could just add one piece, just following along with that, is that like the officers that you are suggesting you wish to add are to address intimate partner violence, and then the I don't know what to like. I'll call it kind of like the power field. Like there's a select group of people in our city that are committing most crimes. We kind of know who they are, and then the other officers will address them. So, like, am I correct when I look at this in seeing that the additional officers are a response not just to growth, but also to advancing our strategic priorities as outlined in our strategic plan?
Chief, then back to you, Deputy Mayor.
So thank you. Yes, and I mean the reality. Yes. So when we look at where we're targeting those officers, that's when we look at our operation, it is in seeking to achieve the goals that this organization has set forward, and reducing victimization and targeting high harm offenders to reduce the overall high harm crime in our city is very much within our strategic plan, and one of the two of the goals there. Yes. So it is very strategic, but that was, and I failed to communicate that at the front end, but all of our operations are around achieving the goals set forward in our strategic plan. And so yes, those 6 individuals will be specifically slotted in to address those.
Deputy Mayor Thompson.
So my understanding was that the 6 officers are already presently trained in that, as you were saying, that it is a more skilled force, that the 6 new hires would actually be the backfill of their day-to-day operations, allowing these officers that we already have in-house to continue and spend their time on that only, as it is a complex, investigation tool and everything else, and lots of follow-up required. Is that my understanding?
That is correct. So from our frontline staffing, we are going to shift those individuals into those areas and then backfill with the new officers. Yes.
So just kind of like, so based on the growth side of it, so last year, the city of Barrie hit probably 75% of their growth target. Last year was about 75%. This year, we're looking at about 600 units total to a targeted of 2,000. And then next year, we're probably in line with some of the things that we've done on council to attract development. We'd probably be close to our 50% of our targeted growth. So, as everybody can see in today's world, we're doing everything to create environments, but we're not seeing the end product of finished units. We've got a lot of approved, but not seeing any. I'm just wondering if, let me be frank, like this board has invested a lot of money into the resources.
Robert.
Chair.
Robert, you'll need to back up, but we lost you there for about 15 seconds. The board
Sorry,
has
what was the
invested
last
a lot.
thing?
The board has
So-
invested a lot, and then we kind of lost you for about 15, 20 seconds.
My apologies. No, I said, like, this board has invested a lot in the resources and human side of our force in the last couple budgets, understanding how we had run, for a long time, efficient on, the number one source of our service being humans. And I just wonder, with the change in the special constables, that maybe this isn't a time to pause on 1 year to look at the results of what we've done, get the stats, call volumes. And I know we get it on a regular basis, but really dive in and look and say that maybe the delay, approve the strategy of moving forward, but by delaying it 1 year and starting in 2027 on a hiring process to achieve the number, but not as like 6 warrant officers, 4 civilians, where we've hired quite a bit of people going for, or in the past already, not knowing that if it's working, to the chief's point, there's other forces with 220 cop to pop ratio, but we are a safer city just by Stats Canada. So we're utilizing what we have, but I just think keep hiring without all the numbers. Like, let's look at the pilot project of the downtown and see if there's a need for more, or are we good with what we've got? Understanding that these officers will be going into a different field, but the skilled officers and the requirement to go there are already there. I've got to be very conscious of an 11% budget. And then I think from now until this budget's presented to council, the mayor, myself, and this board need to really reach out to the provincial government, as we're providing a service that is less than 50% utilized by the taxpayers of Barrie in the court systems. I don't believe that the burden should be on 100% of the taxpayers of Barrie. So that's kind of my thoughts. And I think that we might be a little bit premature in the hiring at this rate this year.
Chief? Thank you, Chair, through you. And just with the growth size of a police organization within the purview of the board, I will speak for that. I simply just want to, just for clarification, what being recommended if the board adopts the recommendations of the organization, it's 9.87, not 11.2. And I just want, just for clarification, it's 9.87.
Chair.
Mr. Khan, please. I see. Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to actually Deputy Mayor Thompson, just for clarification, Deputy Mayor, were you requesting that the board and service consider a 0 hire or a partial or reduced hire, just before I go on to my question?
Thanks for the question. Through you, Chair, to Member Khan. So yeah, I'm looking at both those options right now, and just to see what they would look like. But I believe we've hired 6 new officers 2 years consecutively, if my memory serves me correct. I think we accelerated the hiring. So I'm just looking to see if maybe we take what we've done, the investments we've made, and see if there's not an ability to, lessen the hire, look at even the civilian side of it, and say, okay, we absolutely need 2, or going forward, maybe we could delay this by 1 year and come up with a strategy where it's, for the next 3 or 4 years, starting in 2027, we hire 3 new officers as more like, because I just don't think it's sustainable to hire, 6 to 10 people every year.
So thank you for the clarification through your chair to Deputy Mayor Thompson. I am going to pile onto that a little bit, but there's a caveat and then there's some additional. So I was going to ask that, and through you to the chief and possibly Mr. Turner, does deferring a hire of any sort result us in a compounding or a future pile-on, basically, in terms of the fact I don't want any surprises? And let me add on to that just real quick. Before you answer that, are there any items, because I don't have the slide memorized, so I'm on an iPad, I apologize. Are there any of the items that are in this year's recommendation on one of those two charts that you had up that it could be considered more of a one-time cost for this budget that we would not see next year? And then I've got a follow-up after that.
So just on the one-time question, I would say the one that stands out to me the most is the provincial costs. Obviously, that reduction in our grant funding for court security and prisoner transportation would bring us down to that new level. So we wouldn't expect to see that again for 2027. And then also, not definitively, but hopefully most of the impacts to the CSPA we've accounted for, because we wouldn't continue to see those impacts going forward. So that's a number that kind of stands out to me the most. There's also some investments in IT security that we're recommending this year that, again, I don't think we would see that same level of impact for 2027.
So through you, Chair, apologies, Mr. Turner. Through you, Chair, to Mr. Turner, then, do you have your spreadsheet rolling, and are you able to give us a real-time impact, or can you follow up with an email to let us know where that would be if that's appropriate? If we were to back out those numbers for the following year and then follow Deputy Mayor's supposition around either reduced or completely deferred hiring.
If I could, please, Chief. Thank you, Chair. I just, the cautionary note to the board, appreciating we can't expect you to know all the ins and outs. There is some grave concern. I would be failing my office. There are some grave concerns should we claw back on the IT security. We've seen multiple police agencies as well as cities be exposed to very, very recent and very, very expensive data breaches and loss of data, but also, for lack of a better word, they're hijacking of their systems, and it is exponentially way more expensive. These are just, again, when we look at costs, we do need some investment in our IT infrastructure, just like any organization, just for protection.
Yeah, Chair,
I
want to be real clear. My question was not, are we going to put ourselves at risk? My request was there a one-time that would not expose us?
Member Conworth, I'm going to have to beg leave of the board. We're going to have to dig into that one a little further.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Just my follow-up to that was just back last week at our meeting, the mayor, I think, made a reasonable statement around his concern of how we factor for inflation. Of course, I do, personally, I'm mindful that reduced inflation does not mean a price reduction that we should anticipate. It just means a slowing of the inflation. And so I presume that we are factoring for a slower movement of price increases as opposed to an anticipation of price reductions. Again, I'm just wondering how we're planning for that. We need to anticipate that future contracts or future budgets will still continue to see marginal impact of inflation. And if you have any comment on how we're budgeting for that.
Yeah, great question. I would just highlight a couple of things. The first, inflation, U.S. exchange, and tariffs total is a 0.5% impact for 2026. I know looking back a couple of years, inflation alone was 0.9% just in itself. So absolutely, the the level of inflation has kind of leveled off. I think typically, our best strategy to control cost and control inflation is through our procurement, making sure that we have competitive tension in the marketplace. So we do that through open procurements where we can, and making sure that, we're finding that best value that we can. So I agree. I don't think that level of inflation will continue to impact us to the level it has in the past going forward.
Those are my questions for now, Chair. Thank you.
Following up to Deputy Mayor Thompson's in the proposal was 6+4 for civilians. We usually run around 1.5, 0.5. If we don't add the 6 net new, what happens to the 4 civilian jobs that are proposed? They would still be on, or they're not going anywhere? Or would they be deferred as well?
So our costs were figured on, with those we can, I'd certainly, the board, if we would want those personnel. I mean, we're not seeing a reduction in any way, shape or form. Our digital evidence management, the call volume and communications, our court is like, it is overburdened. The asks for like those civilians are vital. But at the same time, we'd still be looking for those individuals. Yeah.
And just back to Deputy Mayor Thompson's comments or options, is now the time with, we made a very concerted effort the last 2 or 3 budgets to get our deployable in line with the what was expected at 250. We've finally done that. City through funding our budget has got us to 250. Should we be taking a pause for a year and then start to ramp up? I think is what perhaps better described what Deputy Mayor Thompson was saying. We got to our goal. Is now the time to, and I know that the response from senior command was from my question. I said, how does this service can't sustain a 2017 or 2017, I think, number? That's 8 years ago. And 10 years after that, we still can't be at 250. I wouldn't think the city is growing. So I wanted to understand, that option is available to the board if they so choose. Any other questions? Yes, the Mayor Nuttall.
Yeah, thanks. So I guess the struggle for me is, like, I know we as a board have been asking the chief to, come back with what the next level of staff complement should be. So it's a request that's come from us. The flip side of that is, like, the budget is just like, to me, the putting policy inside of the budget is really tough because, we really don't get an opportunity to, dive into what complement should be. And it's one of the few things the board of directors of the police service is actually supposed to be doing. So it's like, it's very responsive and then hammered into this really short timeline. And, if you vote for it, then you're pro police. And if you don't vote for it inside of the budget, then, you're not, or whatever the narrative will be in the side of a public police budget. So, like, for me, and I know this isn't the intention, I'm just going to be honest with you, it feels a little bit sandbagged when it's like, hey, here's our budget, and by the way, we're going to 280, instead of, hey, we're going to 280, we need to figure out how to budget, how to get there. And so, those are that's the apprehension that I feel at this point. I do believe that I think it was 2.65, and correct me if I'm wrong, is from provincial downloads. I think those need to be properly communicated, as the deputy mayor said. I think as everyone said around this table, that like this is just not a cost that is in our control whatsoever. And then it's a question of, okay, well, what does the further complement look like going forward? And for me, I'm still trying to grapple with that question, because I just feel like I'm doing this backwards. I just do. I feel like we're dealing with the budget instead of dealing with the policy. Like, is 280 the number in 2030? I don't know. I don't know what backs up these estimates. I know what backs it up for this year. I've heard that. Obviously, you know, some need is out there that needs to be filled. But I just don't know. And we haven't had a conversation beyond, hey, the 2017 number ain't enough. What's the 2027 number look like? You know? Anyway, I'm babbling.
Mr. Chair, can I ask the mayor if I can join him on a friendly comment regarding this? Because I think I know where he's going.
Yes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Here's my comment to you. When we meet, certainly at the beginning of a term, we develop a strategic plan, and the strategic plan rolls out our sort of short, mid, and long-term objectives. And I appreciate your concern and your frustration. What I'm looking at it, maybe through you, Chair, back to the chief, is as we're aligned with our strategic plan, our overall goal is to make these, meet these objectives, short, medium, and long-term objectives. Whether we break that down on how we're going to do that annually, or whether we break those priorities down on what we need to do today because we're in a deficit or a compromised position, and therefore can we delay or defer one element to the following year but still meet our strategic, or the goals outlined in our strategic plan. I'm just wondering, Mr. Mayor, if that still allows us as a board to have confidence that we're still meeting our objectives. It's just how we break down the minutia of it. So we have some flexibility on.
But I think, look, I don't think that anything you just said is out of reason. I think the problem that I'm facing is that, and maybe it's just a difference in how we do things, but like we set our strategic plan in the first meeting of city council at the beginning of the term, and then we don't just pass things in budgets. We have reports in between that build up to, okay, we're going to approve this policy change. There's a dollar amount associated with the policy change going forward. And then when you put those things together, it goes into the budget, then the budget delineates what the impact of those policy changes that you've made in order to meet the strategic plan going forward. And so, I'm just like, for me, maybe I'm sounding incredibly bureaucratic. I don't know, but like for on what I'm used to, like that's the way it goes. So when I start going through the budget last week and to go into budget on Thursday with like, okay, of this understood increase, but now recognizing we're going above what our recognized complement is, and then having to ask for exactly what that looks like after being asked to vote on. It's like, it feels like we're rushing in to get the budget approved, get the budget dollars in there without having the fulsome discussion on what the complement should be. And like maybe the complement should be 350. I don't know. But we have skipped, in my estimation, we skipped a step here.
Understood. Strong, you had a question?
Yeah, I think maybe I have a couple questions. First, what is the date in which we must present the budget? Like, where are we actually rushed? Like, do we need to pass this today?
We do not need to pass it today, but I'll let Mr. Turner the timeline. Presentation to council is November the 3rd to 28th or something like that.
We're scheduled to present to the Finance and Responsible Governance Subcommittee with the city on November 26th.
26th. Obviously, they need that our budget proposal in advance of that. So is that 2 weeks in advance of that, Mr. Turner?
I think it's fair to say they would prefer that probably a month ahead of it, just for their own planning and to build it into their complete budget request. So ideally, we're targeting the October board meeting for approval, if that is possible. But I'm sure there's some leeway there with the city as well.
So no, it's not, to answer your question, no, it's not today. It'll be the October meeting and if necessary, beyond, for the final budget to approve our budget.
If I could follow up to that, then like I know we obviously we're having a meeting now. We got some information prior to the meeting that we requested in the last meeting, and if it is the will of the board that we have a more wholesome strategy policy discussion before passing the budget, I'm certainly willing to participate in that discussion, and I see some value and merit in it. And I mean, like there's like a few things like we've heard. I think one of the difficulties that I have is that the complement of police is not a policy, in my view. Like that's an operational matter in which we have policies, we have strategies. And pretty much like our number one resource here to meet those objectives is people. So when we have a strategy around harm reduction in evidence-based policing, like sure we have some tools, software tools, things like that, but that we use for that, but that's just like a sliver of the pie in how we actually affect that. The way we affect that is people. We have a goal of and a policy and a strategy around the way in which we address intimate partner violence. Like we have had many reports to the board around our response to intimate partner violence, the way in which we will address victims of crime, special training that we've sent our officers on. And then, so the interesting thing is that our policy around intimate partner violence remains the same. The difference is more people are experiencing intimate partner violence. And then to address that, we need more people on our end because we're getting more calls and there's more requirement for this. So it's tricky because have we changed our policy? Not really, but I guess we need more information and data around like those increases in calls and how we're responding to them and how to, and then like what's the outfall of that too? Because like we know, for example, intimate partner violence is a high harm crime, and it's not just to the person, like the one person in the relationship who's experiencing that violence, which often but not always is a female. But often and not always, there's children in that home, and then they are experiencing adverse childhood experiences, and then that has a ripple effect because people who experience more ACEs are more likely to become perpetrators of crime or victims of crime themselves. Like we've got this cascading effect here, and maybe we need more data coming to the board, perhaps more regularly around the impacts that we're seeing and then the resources that we need to address those. So like I definitely agree that like I feel like we're in a similar type situation always at budget time. I also know that budget is the place where you put the resources to address the priorities and the way in which you're going to carry out your business. And ours is just, it's partially people. So yes, I agree. We need to kind of maybe take a step back and look at this, and then a more looking at it in a holistic way across the organization and how these people are helping us to meet our priorities. And then I just have one other quick comment, which is that, and I say it, I think every year at budget time, our budget is always out of whack, in my view, because we talk about how we need more resources to respond to growth and increase calls and increase service, but we don't ever get the benefit of the increased assessment applied to our specific budget. Like the snowplow budget doesn't need to go up all the time because there's more roads, because it's more houses and they're paying more taxes, and that goes into the snowplow budget. So you don't have to see a 20% increase in snowplow budget because there's 20% more roads. The assessment growth is part of what attracts those funds to pay for that. And we don't have that. That's not applied for us, to us as the police service, the way it is applied to snow plowing, firefighters, and other municipal services. So it's always a bit out of whack, in my opinion. And I say that every year, and I'll just keep on saying it.
If we start a 0% increase would be probably a -3% decrease in budget. Mr. Mayor.
So I also agree with that. But I do want to, really identify that the city's increase is 7 or 8%. Right? So when you get into the game of 2.7 or 8% is the number, and we've had 23 was 7 something, 24 was 6 something, 25 was 6 something, and 26 is proposed to be 9 now, something like that. Originally, and yeah, if we accepted the recommendations, yeah, you compare that with what we're dealing with the city hall, which are 0, 0, 0, and 0 on the operating, except for the portion that Director Strawn just delineated. I think we just have to be careful of how far we push that narrative when we have a city hall that's living within its means.
Mr. Khan, please.
Thanks, Chair, and I apologize, and just letting the board know I will have to jump off shortly. Just following up a question, I agree with both the comments from the mayor and Director Strawn. I am interested, though, if we have an idea, just by way of the impact or measurement that technology is having on our resources in terms of by adding these automated elements. We have a fair amount of automation coming in, and we also have a fair amount of civilianization that this board has invested in. Regarding calls for service resources, intimate partner violence, as outlined by Member Strawn, is the automation, are we able to measure the impact that it's having in terms of reduction of stress on resources, or the rate at which we must hire to add complement?
Chief.
Chair, through you. Yes, we can't quantify them in terms of, I can speak to specifically. So we have the Rubicon system, which is an online system. So whatever thousand, and we can bring that back to the board, whatever thousands of call per year that are handled through the online, our officers not going there. And you can imagine an officer attending every single one of those thousands of calls. We have a virtual call response, whatever number, and we can bring that back to the board in terms of every single time that happens. More importantly, because of the investments of the board with respect to the care team, and we are piloting. Those are every single one of those calls is at least a 2-officer response that we are no longer going to. That's the paramedic services, Simcoe County, and mental health of Simcoe County are going to those calls. Now, we do have our communicators taking that call initially, but none of our frontline resources beyond our communicators are being dedicated to that unless they're needed, and we are not seeing that whatsoever in the data. So we can certainly bring that back to the board. And I just, to take it, and with your permission, Chair, just a quick comment. I do want to make sure that the board's well aware, on behalf of the organization, we're under no illusion at how supportive our board is of this service. It is appreciated. We're in a very fortunate position where all members, and I'll go on record, all members of this board have been incredibly supportive of this organization and the community safety being our priority. And so I do want to make sure that that's out there, that we know there's, these are the tough discussions that we have to have. Happy to have them, but I think we're all on the same page, and that everyone's here. They want to see a safe community. So no one wants to see the community less safe. I know that.
So through you, Chair, just on behalf of perhaps the board, I personally would appreciate that data that was referenced by the chief in terms of the impact of the automation and the number of calls for service, et cetera. Just a quick follow-up, and I apologize. I am in an airport, Chair, and just how to use the facilities. I'm not going to give you a Mike McCann response. This is day one on council, but I know how much effort it was for me to put down my carry-on and my personal item, et cetera, before I got on the plane.
I also would have liked to make my flight home last.
Staff, our sworn officers, our members on the road, they've got that kit that we've all seen and that we've all recognized how cumbersome that can be in terms of getting into a car or whatever. When they need to take a personal break. My question that I sent in through email was, is now the time, as much as this may not be a fancy item to talk about in terms of the impact, in terms of time away from the road, time away from answering calls, if they have to travel from newly developed areas or areas in the south end that are continuing to be developed back to headquarters, time loss. Is now the right time for us to be asking the city or looking internally on how we're going to assist our members on the road with their personal breaks and the amount of time it takes for them to get out of their gear and back into their gear? And my question specifically was, really, I guess, through our service to mayor and council, is there room in Station 6 Fire Hall, or is there room in the rec facility, or is there a third option that I haven't considered in terms of future planning for that growth and that time on the road?
I think that the answer is, Eric, that whatever access our police want to our buildings to be able to facilitate staying on the road, we'll figure out. So,
sorry, by way of just quick follow up to that, to the mayor, and I'm sorry if I spoke out of line there. I am aware, if I'm correct, that our members would need from a safety perspective, they would need a dedicated room to be able to get out of their gear temporarily. And please correct me if I'm wrong.
We have this facility and the new facility downtown, correct?
Yes, we also have 79 Belfarm, the training facility. So, but the downtown office is certainly, well, anticipating that will be available too.
Apologies, Chair. My specific question was to growth in the south end, just based on travel time that was discussed.
I think the south end is, from here, because of Big Bay and Harvey, like you're talking 5-6 minutes away. Now, maybe the southeast corner is probably a little longer down, maybe if you drive, but we have Station 6, as you've said. If we need to access Station 6, we can. It's obviously a brand new facility opening in the coming weeks. There's also Station 4 over at RDOT here. Yeah.
And Mr. Mayor,
So
please.
the takeaway that this is not an issue then, is that my understanding from through you, Chair, to the chief? It's not an issue.
Thank you. Yeah, so from, specific to the south end, no, that is, with the construction of the new roads and the bridge, yeah, we're, I think, it is adequate where we're at right now.
Or no?
Thank you, Chair. Thanks.
So the time savings related to the capital investment, is that, do we have a way, sorry, I'm laughing on and off here. The time savings from the capital investment into the new technology, do we have a way to quantify that, estimate that?
We can attempt to do so in terms of approximations of average time per call, but that is a gross number. I would suggest, and then with respect to the board, so, and I know it's been very supportive, our ability to stay at, so not going beyond that 250 is that being that goal to get to, it's our ability to continue to provide great services, because it's somewhere built into there is that our ability to stay with that number, because we've been trying all these different things, and I think we've seen some real value, and please don't misunderstand that. So I think it's there is we can provide some, but none will be a specific accurate number that I think you're looking for, which is fair, but I just don't know if there is one more you can speak to that.
Yeah, Chief, I think like I'm on the same road you are on this. Like the capital investment in technology to reduce the some of the onerous activities across all of the frontline complements. I guess I'm trying to figure out. Okay, so we're investing in people, but when we invest in technology, we're also investing in people, right? Like, because you're relieving, hopefully, some of the onerous paperwork that's taking place constantly, and allowing those folks to focus on policing. So I'm just trying to like bring this all together for myself. And I guess my position is this, and you know, the deputy mayor and I have gone back and forth on our thoughts with each other for quite a while. I was probably not in a position where I can wrap my head around going with an increased complement today, mainly because I feel that I should have that debate before I vote on the budget for it. Second piece is we don't know what's coming from the province, and this is, you know, the deputy mayor has been very clear on this. We've had opportunities to speak with other levels of government even over the weekend with regards to the issues that we're facing in public safety. So, you know, I'd be probably open to a lesser number of new officers, and I'd probably be open to the fall date. And I'd like, as part of the budget motion, I don't know if we can take this in an amendment, Mr. Chair, but part of the budget motion to schedule like our next in camera, if we can. I don't know if we're allowed to talk about this in camera, but what we believe the dedicated complement should be. And rather than saying 280 inside of the budget, like let's have that conversation outside of the budget.
Yeah, and I don't even think it needs a motion, Mr. Mayor. That part of it, it's a direction to staff. But this came as a result of conversations I have with senior management. I think what you're asking, and I think is reasonable. Maybe it should be 300 by 2030.
Yeah.
You know, what's the analysis done to say, based on call volume, geography, size of population, complexity of calls, we should be at, by 2030, 300 officers. Then we can look at the analysis, and if we think that's a reasonable, then we'll, as you say, roll it back into your budget rather than rolling it into the budget, which we're doing at this stage. So I think that's a direction that we can provide to the chief, to analysis where should we be based on the population projections, call volumes, complexities, geography, etc.? What is it, what we historically called authorized complement? What should it be? That can be, I don't think we're going to get that for October. And it's probably a wholesome discussion just on its own. So I think what some options, what does this budget look like with 2 or 4 net new versus 6? I think 0, 0, 2, 4. We know what 6 is. It's in here. This is 6. What's 0 look like? So that what does maybe we'll cut it in half. What's 0 and what's 3 look like?
Now, and if I can, again, this is now seeping into the budget is like operations because the idea that the hiring complement is going to be determined based on increasing the, I don't know the name of the units, folks, please give me a little bit of raise here, but the folks responding to domestic violence or complex family issues, whatever we refer to them as. That's just like not a thing that I have any expert advice for you on, just because I just don't know. And thank God there's people who are experts on it because I don't want to be an expert. So I think that that's operational in nature. I think the other 2 positions, there was another movement to something else.
High harm, bail compliance recidivists.
Right. And I think that like that again is probably in the same order. The real question for me is like, what's the number? And then what's the plan to get there over time? And what does it equal in our estimation? And what are we doing? Because I think you're doing a lot in this service to try to be ahead of technology changes, finding efficiencies, and all of those types of things, Chief. So, and you put that together and it's like, okay, well, here's where we're going to land on the budget based on all that. And so I'm not sure I need really another full 2-hour meeting. Like I probably need another 15-minute or half an hour if we get out of control.
Yeah, I think so too. If we got the options in front of us in advance, and I think we can just do it in our October meeting, Mr. Mayor. Put it on the agenda and have some options in front of us and pose a motion to deal with is it really, I mean, if outside of one-time things that we could defer, it's really a staffing issue. Yeah, maybe we, is there something in the budget? There's 11 new cruisers. Maybe we go with 6. I don't know that much of a detail. And the reason, just for people that may be watching, why we're spending so much time, we are a people organization, and it also represents 90% of our budget. So that's why we're spending 90% of our time dealing with personnel, because that is our budget for the most part. But if there's any other, to Mr. Khan's point, if there's some one-time stuff that maybe can be deferred to 2027, we roll our cruisers every so often. Maybe we look at that policy. I'm not, is there any one-time defer, and then without any net new, what's that look like? That's fair. And we'll deal with that as part of our October meeting. I don't know what our agenda looks like for October, but I'm sure it's quite full already, but we'll deal with that. Mr. Khan has left the meeting. Thank you, Mayor. Any other additional questions at this stage with respect to the budget? Seeing none. Motion to adjourn. Thank you, everyone. I know all the effort that's gone into this. We appreciate it very much. So thank you.